Hi guys, glad you're here. We're going to take a look at Visual Studio 2015 for the first time. I'm running Windows 8.1 and I'm going to go find Visual Studio because it's been recently installed on my computer. So I'm going to access my Windows 8 Start menu and start typing Visual. Oh, there it is, Visual Studio 2015. That's what I want to start. I have the Enterprise version installed. If you have DreamSpark Access, that's the version that you would want to download. Now, I've already run Visual Studio once, and the first time I ran it, I told Visual Studio that I wanted my settings set for a C# developer. So if you see any differences with your Visual Studio, it could be just that small implementation at the beginning, that parameter setting. I'm looking at, of course, the start page in Visual Studio, which always comes up when I first started up, and it's got some interesting information for me about what's new in Visual Studio, new features. There's lots of new things for you to explore if you're already a Visual Studio user. If you're not already, then take a look at this stuff after you start becoming a little familiar with things. Now, the start page, if you notice, is in a tab. This tab is available for you probably pretty much at any time from your view menu. Say probably, it is available from your view menu. And if you want to close it, you can of course close any tab using the little X. I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of the start menu quick links and choose new project. As I create a new Visual Studio project, I'm going to choose Visual C# because I'm using C# today. If I were using one of the other languages, I might have to go doing a little bit more looking, like Visual Basic. If, again, you didn't choose Visual C# Developer on your first run of Visual Studio, you might want to make sure that you're on Visual C# as your project type. Once you've clicked on Visual C#, under Templates, we have a bunch of available templates to use. Our first application is going to be a console application, so I'm going to choose that template. Now, down at the bottom of the screen, this is very, very important. I have a project name. This is not a good name. This is the default name, Console Application 1. I want to change that. My application, this first one, is of course going to be Hello World. And then I want to verify my location. Right now my location is set to a network drive, and this is actually mapped to my documents folder by my organization. So I'm going to leave my location set that way. You want to make sure that you're saving your projects to the right place and that you know where that place is. There are facilities within Visual C# to access your project folder, but your life will be much easier if you actually know where the system is putting it. If you notice over here, I'm going to create a directory. For this solution, my directory or folder will be named Hello World. If I don't like this location, of course, I can browse and change it. Later in our school year, in our situation, we'll be using a source code control system, but at this point we're not using that. So I believe I'm ready to click OK. I've made sure I'm on C#. I'm creating a console app. I've given it a valid name, and I've checked my location, and I know where my project is going to be saved, so I'm ready to click OK. It's going to take a second to create my project, a little bit longer on older, slower systems, surprisingly enough. And if you have a brand new blazing system, it's pretty quick. Mine wasn't too bad, not too bad. Now, I see the Visual Studio IDE interface. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. And before we start our Hello World project, we're going to explore the IDE a little bit. At the top, of course, we have our title bar, standard Windows title bar. Notice my project name is stated so I know what I'm working on and that I'm using Microsoft Visual Studio. Underneath that is, of course, my menu bar. Underneath that is my toolbar. We'll take a look at some of the different tools as we go on. You're welcome to take a look, and of course you should be familiar with all the different menu options so you know where things are in Visual Studio. Some options you'll use quite frequently. They'll be on toolbars. Others you won't use very often. If you take a look at your View menu, you'll notice right away that there are many options, toolbars available in Visual Studio. So many so that we even have a list of other windows. So it is quite a complicated and very useful system. We want to make sure we're getting the most out of it. So we're going to start looking at things a little bit. As you see, my window space is divided into panes. My main pane right now, the middle of my screen, is showing my program file. This file is named program.cs. It's the default program code file for a C# application in Visual Studio. You can see Visual Studio generated some code for me. We'll come back and look at that in a minute. The other panes on my window are very important also. Over here I have the Solution Explorer. The Solution Explorer gives me information about my project and my C# solution. I could have multiple projects in my solution, but for right now we'll be pretty much limited to one project per solution. You see your solution has this icon that looks like the Visual Studio icon. That's where you know you're at the solution level, and if you change information at that level, of course you apply those changes to every project within your solution. Now underneath my solution I have my Hello World project. You can see it has the C# icon because it is a C# project. Underneath that I have some other information that we'll be taking a look at as time goes on throughout our course, but as you saw right now we're looking at our program.cs file. Notice that I can find that in my Solution Explorer if there's a time when I'm looking for it. Now the Solution Explorer is in its own little window, its own little pane. I also have a Properties window down here, which is not showing me very much right now. It's used more often in form-based applications, so it's not something that is, as important as we see right now. Our toolbox also is not really showing us any contents because we're not doing a form-based application. So as we work with this console-based application, we have fewer tools available to us than what we would have if it were a form-based application. We'll get into those later on in the semester. For right now, though, I want to focus on the different windows and how things are working throughout my program. My Solution Explorer window frame, if I wanted to move it, if for some reason I don't like it over here, I could drag it by the title bar, click and hold my right mouse key and drag that window straight out of its current location. This handy, helpful gadget comes up allowing me to specify if I would like to have it at a certain location on my screen. Kind of play with that and notice how it gives you options as to where you want to place that toolbar. If I decide that I want to place it over on this end of the screen, I'll put it over here. Notice it's now rearranged some other parts of my screen so that I can have it however I want it, I guess. Now, right now my Solution Explorer window is pinned. That means that it doesn't slide back in and auto hide like my toolbox did. If I want to change that setting, I can click on this push pin icon, and now my Solution Explorer and the Team Explorer window that was kind of hiding under it are both unpinned, and they will auto hide over here to the side of the window. If I want to look at that again, I can click on my Solution Explorer tab. Notice my Team Explorer is not coming up automatically. It was part of my Solution Explorer, now it's not. But I can go ahead and auto hide those. Now, if I want my Solution Explorer to stay on the screen, I'll bring it back up, push my pin, and now it's docked automatically and attached to the screen. Notice that it did put the Team Explorer back with it. This is where I can have one window on top of another in Visual Studio. I have the Solution Explorer, and underneath that I have the Team Explorer window. The Team Explorer again has to do with source code control. So we'll be looking at that later on. I'm going to return back to my Solution Explorer. Now, if I decide my properties are in the wrong place, again, I can move that around. If I wanted to slide across the whole bottom of the screen, I can choose that. If I want to move it down a little bit, I can position my mouse over that transitional area, hold my right mouse button and drag it to relocate it. So do try that. Click, hold, drag, release. Now, if I get my windows so messed up that I can't figure out where anything is, which can happen, I can go to my window menu, and somewhere in here I can reset my window layout so that Visual Studio will put everything back to the default layout, which can be really handy if you get it somehow to where you don't like it. Alright, so that's Visual Studio in a nutshell. It is a very complicated product. We have lots and lots of different options that we'll be exploring as the semester goes on, but you should be able to navigate a little bit right now. As we look at program.cs, this is our code window. To type our first lines of code, we want to find our main. This is where we're going to get started. Every program that we write will have a main method, and we can only have one main method, so we'll see how things work as we go on. My code is going to go within this set of curly brackets that delineate the main method. So I'm going to click right there to drop my insertion point in right after that curly bracket, and I'm going to press enter. When I do that, notice that Visual Studio automatically indents my code for me, which is the way I want it. I want my code to be indented. I'm going to go ahead and create a block comment. So I'm going to start with a /*. I'm going to put a space and then a line of asterisks because I want this to be a comment block that stands out. When I do that, if you notice, I should be able to continue on my comment block. I have all of my curly brackets under this position here, if you notice, have turned green. Anytime I put comments in Visual Studio, they will turn green. When I type the /*, Visual Studio assumes everything after that /* is a comment. So now I'm getting a red curly squiggly line by that curly brace to say, hey, I don't have a matching closing curly bracket. That's because this comment code has accidentally commented that out. So as you're typing in your comment, continue on. Don't worry too much about what's going on with Visual Studio until you finish your comment block, and then everything should reevaluate and be back to good. Now, when I start a program, I want an inline documentation comment block that tells us a little bit about this program. So I'm going to put program : and this is going to be hello world. The developer is going to be you. Put your name here, please, so that I see your name in code. That's what I want to see. And I know that you're copying this from me, but that's okay because you're the developer of this one as you're creating it on your own. And our date, I am writing this starting on 1/20/2016. And our purpose. And I would like this comment block in all programs that are submitted, and that way we're consistent and we're documenting our code. The purpose of this program is to say hello. Now I'm going to, on my last line, tab over and put in that whole row of asterisks and stop and do a asterisk or star slash. Now notice how that ended my comment block. Now all of my comment code is green. My curly brackets have become uncommented, so Visual C# knows they're part of the code. So the red squiggly line has gone away by this one. And this will mean more to you as you develop. I just want you to see that some of these things are things that are transitional as you're typing your code. Now, in this program, I'm going to do a statement that writes something out to the console. So I'm going to start out with the Visual C# keyword console. Notice as I type that this drop-down menu pops up. That's the IntelliSense. We'll be looking at that a lot, but for right now, don't worry about it. We want to type some of our code here to start. Now, the console class has a method that allows me to write something to the console, and that's called WriteLine. Whenever I am typing a class like console and I want it to do something, I'm going to have the name of the class followed by a dot or a period. And again, I want to write a line. Notice again the IntelliSense coming up, telling us a little bit about what we're doing and giving us some handy hints. We'll look at that more. When I use the WriteLine, I need to tell WriteLine what I want written to the console. And I want a string written to the console. So my string is going to be inside parentheses. And anytime I'm writing a string in Visual C#, I'm going to enclose it within double quotes. Notice that when you type the opening parenthesis and the beginning double quote, Visual C# or the IDE automatically types closing ones for you. So it'll keep everything all nice and aligned if you let it. Now what I'd like to write to the console is hello world, and I'm going to put an exclamation point. Now you've got your first line of code here, but notice C# has a red squiggly line there at the end. Something's not okay. So if I take my mouse and move over right at that red squiggly line, it says, oh, semicolon expected. Okay, we always have to end our lines of code with a semicolon. So I'm going to click at the end of the line and type my semicolon. Wow, I've written my first program. You guys are great. Let's run it. Now, in order to run this program, we are going to look at the toolbar across the top, and we're looking for this play menu item or start. I'm going to go ahead and click start. You see down in the corner the build has started. That means it's evaluating all the syntax, creating that intermediate language code for C# that can be executed. Then, because we're really running the program, it's compiling it the whole way to machine code and running it. Well, did you see that? The little console window came up and disappeared. If you were quick, you noticed it said hello world, but it wasn't really a very user-friendly thing. There's a couple of things we can do about that. The first one is, instead of just clicking this button, we can press the Control key and F5 at the same time, because F5 is the same thing as running this Start button, and Control says, I want you to hold that console window open until I press a key. So this time I'm going to press Control F5. Now I see that this console window opened up, and there's my message, hello world. It's kind of hidden in some of these system messages, but there's the one I'm looking for that says hello world. Now because I pressed Control F5, this window is staying open, and it says press any key to continue. So I'll go ahead and press the key to go back to my program. Now there's another way we can handle that. That's the way they handle it in our book. I'm going to go ahead and put in the read key statement, which basically makes my code control that stopping and waiting. Now with the read key, again, we're using the console class, and we're saying, hey console, I would like to read in a keystroke. Well, in our parentheses, we're going to put nothing because we don't really care what key they press. We just were kind of using that to sit there and wait on that console. So now I'll run my program again. And, oh, much cleaner, right? Because with Control F5, I was seeing all those system messages. Now I'm just seeing the hello world message. Wow, look, I have some cool diagnostic tools running with Visual Studio 2015. I'm going to go ahead and press enter or any key to have that message go away. Awesome. Now, that worked. We got our first program written. Did a great job. While we're here, let's explore a little bit about Visual Studio and some things that can happen to us. We did a really good job and we put our code inside these curly brackets. But if I were to actually move this curly bracket, I'm going to grab it and drag it up here before my code. Now my comments are still in the right place, but my code isn't. Notice right away I got a bunch of red squiggly lines. If I mouse over those, it says, hey, this doesn't really exist in the current context. Well, that's not super helpful. I really don't know what it's saying, and it's saying the same thing about this one. Well, I wonder if I could get an error message out from the compiler that would give me more information. I'll try. I'm going to go ahead and click the start button, even though I've got an error there, and see if I can get some more information. Now I have a syntax error, and that's what this is saying. There were build errors. Usually I want to say no, I don't want to run something that's got errors. When you do that, the error list window will pop up, and that can be very helpful. Now, sometimes we have a lot of code and these red squiggly lines aren't as obvious. We might not see them. The error list window is always going to tell us what kind of errors we have and what line number we're on. If we double click on an error in the error list, the IDE will take us directly to that line of code that's giving us trouble. Notice though, it's really not saying much more helpful. Invalid token. It is talking a little bit about curly brackets, so that's a little more helpful. So my advice is, anytime you're seeing error messages like this when you're first starting out, check your curly brackets. And I can do that in the IDE by selecting a curly bracket. Notice when I do that, the IDE sort of grays or highlights the matching one. Well, I should notice right away that I don't have anything important in between those two curly brackets. This block of code is outside that one, so I'm going to move it back to where it belongs. Watch curly brackets, matching them up. See how important it can be. Notice how if I click on the bottom one, it's highlighting the top one. The top one's not being able to do that though, so you kind of have to go down here to get it all matched up. Curly braces are very, very important with your C# development, so watch those carefully. Now we saw another error that we could get is if we didn't have a semicolon. If I delete the semicolon, notice now that my error list window is up, it immediately shows me that error message that I could get by mousing over. It says your semicolon is expected. Okay, I'll put the semicolon in. Sometimes people say, is C# really that picky? Yeah, it is. Now, what if I'm missing these parentheses? I said I need them, but I don't know why. I'm just going to delete them out and see what happens. Wow, it's just not a very helpful message at all, is it? Only assignment, call, increment, decrement, and new object expressions can be used as statements. That's not very helpful. But if I mouse over that red squiggly line, the IntelliSense editor this time gives me a really helpful message. It says, hey, read key, and if you notice right there, it should have parentheses before and after it. So it tells me a little bit about this command, and basically, hopefully from that first little part there, I see that I need parentheses before and after that, or around that is a parameter. Okay, so we've got our program written. I'm going to go do save all and save everything in my program file, and I'm going to finish up here because that was our Hello World program. Do explore Visual Studio a little more, get familiar with it, because it can very much be your friend. Thanks. Have a great day.